My brother James has a girlfriend, Lindsay, who he's been dating for 7 months. He decided to bring her to Christmas at my house, stay over Christmas Eve and leave the next day after lunch. I'd met Lindsay at drinks before this and she seemed nice. When they arrived, Lindsay walked in and complimented my decorations, large tree in the foyer, and asked how much they cost. I was a bit surprised by the question, but I just said more than I'd like and moved on. Throughout the evening she asked several questions centered around money. She asked my husband how much he paid for our house, my stepdad how much money he made in his previous job, how much my watch cost. She even Googled one of our art pieces to see how much it sold for and started talking about how crazy it was that we spent that much, which frankly was very uncomfortable. My stepdad pulled my brother aside and asked if there was a problem, but my brother just said it was normal for her to do that, but he did say he'd speak to her about it. On Christmas morning we all gathered round to open presents and thankfully, Lindsay didn't say anything untoward, so I figured James had spoken to her about her intrusive questions. However, at lunch, we were talking about plans for January and Lindsay loudly said she didn't know how we could afford to do anything in January as she added up the total we'd spent on gifts, and then proudly proclaimed the total amount. The whole table went silent, and honestly I was equal parts shocked and annoyed that someone could be so ignorant. I looked at Lindsay and said, "You are the world's most diligent gold digger. Seriously, would you like to be the family accountant since you're already tracking expenses?" Lindsay stuttered out an apology and tried to explain, but my stepdad just changed the conversation and we moved on. She was mercifully quiet for the rest of dinner. After they left, my brother messaged me saying I'd really upset Lindsay and was out of line with what I said. I argued that he had said he'd talk to her and he clearly didn't. Not that someone should have needed guidance to know how crass her comments were. He is saying I owe both of them an apology, but I think Lindsay's behavior was disgraceful. My parents say Lindsay was wrong, but I probably should have said something in private, or they could have, and I shouldn't have said something in front of everyone. Am I in the bad here? My husband's daughter moved in with us after she turned 18 because she hated her mom's BF. I actually had a friend paying to rent a room at the time who I asked to move out so she could have it. Even didn't charge him for the last month to help him find a place. It has honestly sucked. She was entitled, lazy, refused to clean up after herself. Would complain about dinner, and get up and go back to her room leaving her plate at the table, would clean her room and leave a sink load of moldy dishes. Never once helped clean any common areas, paid no rent. One time I woke up to her gone and the guy she had been dating for 3 months watching TV in my living room, while she was at work. I could go on for days. She would only help if something turned into a fight, either with her and I or her dad. 5 weeks ago we got into it again, and she packed her stuff and left. Found out later that she'd moved in with her 40-year-old male co-worker. Now, co-worker and her are not getting along. It honestly sounds like similar problems. And she wants to come back. I'll be honest, I already cleaned out her room and made it into a game room/office/workout room. Life had been 1,000 times better with her not here. She comes over and visits regularly. That started not long after she left. QND she got nicer and nicer as she told us how mean her roommate were. This guy has a married couple QND child living with him too, and her dad still takes her out for dinner and things like that, so it's not a NC situation. Her mom is currently couch surfing so she can't move back in with her. I don't want her to move back in here. My husband wants us to let her come back but give her a timeliness to find another place. I don't want to because, 1, I am enjoying the peace and having our own space, 2, I don't trust her to stick to an agreement, 3, she had bad mouthed to a ton of people, and her friends call me step monster, so I am not really feeling that inclined to help her. Okay, so before I start I feel like a bit of backstory is required here. So I suffer with bipolar disorder and my husband is a recovered alcoholic. We got together when we were at our complete lowest. I was going through my first manic episode and he was in the depth of his addiction. We were a mess, but multiple rehab and psych ward visits. We are now 35 and he is 10 years sober and I am medicated and stable. so although we're both in a very good place in our lives, we do have a zero alcohol in the home for obvious reasons. My meds under no circumstances cannot mix with alcohol, and my husband obviously can't drink it, so we prefer to keep it away from our home to prevent the risk of him relapsing. This being said, we obviously don't care if people around us drink or if we go to events with alcohol, it's just not in our home. Now for Christmas my parents usually host, but for the past 3 years one of my siblings has hosted instead. There are 5 of us. This year I was asked to host and was fully up for this. We have a beautiful home and can afford to cater to everyone. Now I did say from the get-go that I don't mind hosting, but there cannot be any alcohol in my home, and if this was going to be a problem then we should just do it elsewhere, as I don't want to risk anything. This may be dramatic, but when you live with a recovered addict you have to be as cautious as possible. No one said anything and I assumed everything was fine and that they were all okay with the no alcohol rule. When Friday rolled around, my sister called me asking if it was okay if she brought a bottle of Prosecco for her and her husband, and that she knows I'm strict about the no alcohol rule, but it would just be for her and her husband. I told her no, and we ended up getting into a huge fight. I told her that if she wanted alcohol then we could host at her place, but by no circumstances was there being alcohol brought under my roof. She said I was being dramatic. After speaking to my mom, she said it was too last minute to change arrangements, and is one day of alcohol really going to affect much? I personally feel like my sister brought it up so last minute to try and force me in a corner, but I just said that if they want alcohol they're not coming into my home with it. They ended up not coming for Christmas and held it at my sister's without inviting us. I had a lovely quiet Christmas with my husband, but now none of my siblings, parents and grandparents will speak to me. I felt as though I didn't do anything wrong, but I'm starting to think maybe I should have offered to pay to eat out or something instead so everyone could have a drink. Also, before anyone asks, my husband was also against any alcohol in the home and called my sister himself to explain why it's so important to us, and mine and my husband's well-being is my personal top priority in the situation. So am I the problem here? My wife and I have been married for 10 years and have 3 kids. For the last 12 years or so, we've had a New Year's tradition of getting together with the same group of friends. Some years we rent an Airbnb and some years we just get together at someone's house. We have only not gotten together 1 year. Even after having kids, we've found ways to keep this tradition going. It's something I really look forward to, as it's getting harder and harder to maintain friendships as we all get older, have kids, and become more entrenched in our own day-to-day lives. This year, we weren't planning on doing anything outlandish. We had planned to get together at one of our friends' houses about an hour from where we live and bring in the new year together. My parents would be coming to our house to watch our kids for the night. However, there is now a wrench in those plans. We were supposed to get together with my wife's family last Saturday for Christmas. But a couple of things derailed that. First, her brother, Sil, and their 3 kids all got sick last week and told the family they wouldn't be making it. Then, the weather took a nasty turn and a lot of roads in our area were closed. My wife's mom and aunt, who would be hosting, decided by themselves that we would just reschedule for this coming weekend, New Year's Eve. There was no discussion, just a group chat sent out telling people that we would be getting together New Year's Eve instead of Christmas Eve. As soon as we got the text, my wife just assumed that we would be going to see her family instead of our friends. She told me that I can call my parents and tell them not to come since we won't need them to watch the kids. I told her I do not want to cancel on our friends since we've had these plans for months and I'm looking forward to it. She told me I shouldn't be prioritizing seeing friends over seeing her family, and that missing New Year's for 1 year isn't going to be a big deal. I told her that she knows how much this tradition means to me because these are lifelong friends for me, and this is one of the few times, if not the only time a year, that I get to see them all in one place. I told her that if she is going to insist on going to see her family instead of our friends, then she can go alone. That made her mad because she had assumed that we would just tell our friends that we can't make it because of our change in Christmas plans. Due to her aunt's house being a 90-minute drive from our house in the opposite direction of our friends, doing both is not a realistic option. My wife's family is getting together at 5 p.m. so even getting to our friend's house by 10 p.m. would be difficult and would require us to probably be the first to leave her family gathering. She is still trying to convince me to cancel on our friends, but I refuse to do that. I want to see my friends and it's not my fault that her family rescheduled without asking if anyone had other plans.